I am honored to be here today, and I'm honored to have an amazing panel of our team members here. They're allowing me to join them on this journey that we're working on together. I will briefly introduce them, and then they'll give each other, and they'll introduce themselves with a little more background. So first we have Carol Keegan. She's a patient advocate and a patients program consultant. Then we have Ms. Aurelia Laird. She's Director of Clinical and Community Research, Bon Secours Baltimore Health System. Then we have Ms. Gail Graham, Director of HIV/AIDS Ministry Outreach Services at Mount Lebanon Baptist Church. And we have Mr. Daniel Fry, Vice President, Public Sector Engagement Strategy at Aerotech.
I just want to start off by saying the most important thing is probably my patient experience. I survived a stroke in 1973 and have been very interested in how things have changed for stroke patients over the decades. I'm a volunteer here with the Patients Program, largely enjoying the practice of having patients open meetings and begin to try to help people get into a frame of mind that says, what's this like for a person with this health condition? So I think about the only other thing I can say about myself is that I've had experience reviewing patient-centered oriented research grants and trying to inject a patient point of view.
My name is Aurelia Laird, and I'm the Director of Clinical and Community Research at Bon Secours Baltimore Health System. I've been working with Dr. Mullins over a decade, trying to promote health equity and decrease health disparities. As we did that together with other partners, we move along to patient-centeredness. So that's where we are right now, and hopefully you'll hear lots more about that today.
Hi, I'm Gail Graham. I'm the Director of Mount Lebanon Baptist Church HIV and AIDS Outreach Services. I'm also the Global Representative for Johns Hopkins University AIDS Clinical Trials Group Board Member. And I am 21 years living with HIV, and I'm a proud patients consultant.
Good afternoon. I'm Dan Fry, and I've had the pleasure of working with the Patients Program as a member of its external steering committee for about 5 years now. As a blind person who has spent about 10 years in Baltimore, I am an attorney. I have worked on the national staff of the National Federation of the Blind, which has its national headquarters in South Federal Hill. Then I worked for the federal government, and most recently have been in New Jersey as the executive director of the New Jersey Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired. Today, I have taken a position with Aerotech Corp., another organization that promotes technology solutions to ensure that blind and vision impaired people can engage in integrated competitive employment. But mostly, I've tried to play a role in the Patients Program to represent the perspective of persons who are blind and vision impaired and make it clear that the authentic voice is what is critical.
Thank you so much. And again, it is truly my honor to moderate this panel today. The teammates, the partnerships that we have with the panelists are amazing, and I'd like to think that we can have those partnerships with everyone, but Dr. Mullins asked that we be real. We really talk about the good and the bad today. So we're going to start with the bad. We'd like to hope that research is always a good experience, but we actually know that's not the truth. So in the Patients Program, we work to have a genuine, true working partnership with the community. We have researchers who come to us thinking, well, you work with the community. I would like to have you go out and recruit for my study. I didn't have it worked in the beginning, but sure enough, you can go in the community and you can go get the 20 patients that I need, right? No, that's not how that works. We do not do that. We will not do that. We will never do that. That is not how we operate. So unfortunately, though, that is how, and that sometimes there are helicopter researchers. They want to come in, they want to do their research, they want to get out. There's no give back, there's no engagement. It's what they want from you for their study. That is not how we operate in the Patients Program. But again, in the sense of being in a community and sharing our experiences, I'm going to ask our panelists today to share their experiences with the helicopter researchers or along those lines.
Probably the worst experience I can think of was sitting in a review panel where I was one of maybe 3 patients in a group of 20 experts who were looking at grant applications for patient-oriented, patient-centered research. And I literally watched a growing disappointment across the table in one of the few patient reps. There were 3 of us on that panel. She later left the room and in disgust and confided to me that she had no idea what was going on. She had had no preparation for participating in this panel, and that she felt like tokenism had taken over her seat. She was there because they needed a warm body at the table, and she did not want to be part of that kind of shallow participation. So that's probably the worst experience that I can think of. I think a lot since that time about what it takes for patients who for decades have not been listened to or have been totally ignored. Think about patients with rare diseases. We are not ready. We need time, we need training, we need confidence to move into the position of being equal partners about research, about how it's designed, about the questions it addresses, about how it's conducted and reported and taken out and disseminated into the community. We need to think a lot about moving from that poor woman's sense of being disrespected to full engagement of patients with the research process.
Well, my recent most I felt quite disappointed in a recent panel that I sat on, where they brought several presenters from health systems, CEOs, CFOs, to sit at the table to talk about patient-centeredness. So to a lot of people, patient-centeredness means talking to patients or just being around the patients, where there's more than just, patient-centeredness is much more than that. So every time I would say something, I was one of the panel sitting around the table, and every time I would try to say something about what patient-centeredness really was or how it felt to be talking to a physician or to someone that you feel of power, that know more about a subject than you do, are not able to participate, they would politely shut me down. So I made several attempts to say, give examples, and at no point would they even allow me to finish my sentence. They would say things to me like, oh, well, in the CFO office, that's not what we do. And you can't, compare talking to the patients to a business. It's a business, and So at that moment, I personally felt very devalued. I felt like what I had to say didn't count. And I even said to those that invited me, why did you even invite me in the first place if the rest of the people sitting here had no interest in what I wanted to say? I felt like my input was disregarded. And then I thought suddenly about the patients. When we are in conversation with the patients, even when we are trying to do patient-centeredness and include them in the research process from the very beginning, we have to allow them and let them feel that what they have to say is important, allow them to feel inclusive, for everyone to value the fact that it's their community. They know what the needs are. They know how they want to partner with us to go about it, rather than us just going into their community and telling them what we want to do. So I suddenly felt like one of those patients, and I thought to myself, this is exactly one of the barriers that prevent patients from coming to the table. where they feel devalued. They don't feel like what they say count, because if they are treating me like this, they knew I was a nurse. It didn't matter to them. They felt way above me, so they just kept talking over me. And at the end of the day, when we had to come to the conclusion of what CER was and patient-centeredness was, they had much difficulty trying to define it or to articulate it in a meaningful way that the audience could capture what they were trying to say. So some of them would say to me, "Oh, you really understand this stuff." But it was kind of too late because I didn't want to engage with them at that point. So I say that to say that when you're talking to patients and when you want to include and bring the patients and the community itself, it doesn't have to be patients, let's talk about community, to the table, you have to let them feel like they're partners, not like you are up and they're down here and you're talking down to them. They have to get the feeling that it's a dialogue where everyone is equal at that moment, at that given time, and everyone's view is important. So that's one of I have not had that many, I've had challenges, but I've not had that many bad experiences. But this was a recent one where I was able to feel exactly what the patients will describe when I try to invite them to go to, any particular event. They would say, I don't want to sit there.
When we do, at Mount Lebanon Baptist Church, we do an annual for World AIDS Day testing for turkey event. So anyone who gets tested for HIV will get a free turkey. We would have different organizations come in, wanting to have tables and, get information from the community. Now, 21215 has a high rate of HIV and AIDS. And we've developed a relationship with our community. So when we have people come into our community and they're standoffish, they want the information from us, and they're really standoffish, they don't know how to talk to you, and it's curt. Being HIV positive, we are already sensitive to people not wanting to deal with us. But to have people come in our community, ask for our help, and then treat us like that is very, I became very protective, and I started limiting who could come into our events. And one of the things I did too, speaking of research, how can I talk about being a research participant if I wasn't a research participant? So I decided that I was going to actually do a research with a special organization. And when I did that, they treated me the exact same way. They were going by my information and they were just asking questions. And then when they found out that I was not appropriate for that particular study, they said, "Sorry, we can't, this isn't the one for you," and that was it. So I was like, why would anybody want to do research and you just, abrupt and curt with them and stuff, and you're trying to help, but you're treating us like, So I think that was one of the worst. And then when also being a part of an advisory board, what we do is we read all the potential research that's going out there to the community that affects a certain area. And as I was reading it, I was like, how do you expect the community to understand this if we can't understand it? Stop putting everything in bring it down to layman's terms. I said, because you're putting people at risk if they're signing things because of what you're offering them, but they don't know exactly what's going on because you're not breaking it down so that they can understand it. And we already have a bad feel for research in our community. So all you're doing is just helping that, extend, because when something goes wrong and they don't understand and you're not explaining things. So from that, the good part was they started bringing things down to the layman's term. And they're even, as far as the consent forms, they're developing video, because some people can't read. So they're developing videos that will, that takes the time and explains everything in a way that people can understand it. So,
Like my colleagues, I have participated in research before. As I indicated previously, I'm a blind person. A lot of people aren't clear or comfortable around blindness, and they often wonder how to engage with us as people, not recognizing that we are as diverse and capable as anyone else. So I went into a hospital to do some research, not related to blindness, but I was a blind person, but I was there for another reason. And I walked into the research room, and the individual, theoretically well-educated professional, said, "Who's in charge of you?" I paused and I said, "Well, I'm in charge of myself today." And she said, "Well, I'm going to put a green band around your arm." And I said, "Well, my suit's blue. I'm not sure." And I said, "But can I ask you why?" And she goes, "It's just going to warn everyone that you're blind." And I said, "Warn them?" I said, "Why don't I just tell them?" I said, "This white cane might give them that information." And I said, "I'm not going to wear that." She said, "If you don't wear this green band that identifies you and gives our professional staff the understanding of what they're dealing with, you won't be able to play." And I said, "You know, I've got a lot of people who want to play with me." My second experience was more about access than anything else. I have gone into a number of research opportunities, and you have to sign a number of consent forms, and that's fine, because there are really genuine ethical reasons why people need to disclose to us as people who are willing to help get the importance out of research, but they need to make it clear that there are things we have to acknowledge, and we all know that. And so I said, "Look, do you have this in electronic form so I can read it?" Now, I've had positive experiences where people say, "You know, I haven't thought about that, but I'll read it to you." But the other people who are not as open-minded have said, "So you can't read?" And I said, "No, I can read. I'm fairly literate. I managed to get through law school. But I can't read this." So access to information and a general understanding that people of different communities, whether you are blind or otherwise disabled, whether you are a female, whether you are a member of an African American or other community, whether you don't speak a native language, all of these distinctions are just distinctions, but we as human beings really do have some core fabric, and with just a little bit of respect and a lot of common sense, it'd be a lot better.
Thank you so much. Again, we wanted to be real in this talk. We really wanted to talk about experiences of each of our panelists, my team members, and I'm honored to call my team members, to really speak about their experiences. We do want to have time for questions to come forward, so we're going to try to make this next part a little quicker, although it's the happy part, but we want to make sure we have time for questions. So the second part of the panel, we want to talk about positive experiences, because in the Patients program, that is what we aim to do. That is our mission, to have a positive, patient-centered experience. So in the Patients program, we have had investigators who from the very beginning, from the concept, the idea, have had the community involved. They have the community involved in the question, the design, the conduct of the study, and then to help to get that word back into the community. So we have investigators who are truly invested in having patient-centered, having the patient, the community being represented, not tokenistic, truly represented as part of the research process. So in the next few minutes, I'd like to ask the panelists to share their positive experience with, thank you, their positive experience with research. And I hope, and I believe that they have a positive light. They've worked with the Patients program. We want to continue that and continue to share that with the community.
The most positive thing that I've experienced, I've been hanging around patient-centered research probably 4 or 5 years now, but I only met Daniel 6 months ago, and as part of volunteering for the Patients program, the positive experience I want to talk about today came from an opportunity to work with a new team. It was a team that contacted the Patients program to get some advice, some conversation going among members of the team about how better to engage patients in the design and conduct of this new study. So to be asked to come in at the very beginning and to listen to people's concerns, both those of the patients and the stakeholders and the caregivers already on the team, and of the researchers who wanted to figure out how better to listen to those patients, how better to think about the points at which in the design and conduct and reporting of the study, patient inputs could really make a difference. I mean, that is a huge change for me to have gone from that poor woman who left the room so quickly being disregarded to a team a few years later that was saying, we don't do enough yet to educate new patients and to be on this team. We want to learn how we can give better resources to the patients, but also we want to learn how we can listen better, how we can collaborate better, how we can co-direct this study.
I have had many positive experiences, but the one that I think that was most gratifying to me was when I worked with one of the investigators, to be exact, Dr. Mullins, and when the study was over, the patients that participated were very leery about people coming into their communities and doing research, and they never hear the results of it. They never hear the outcomes. They never hear anything else from the people. They just come in, do the research, and they go away. And so Dr. Mullins and I talked a lot about this, and he says, oh no, we are going to do it differently. And he did come back with me. We met with the patients that were, some of the patients that were part of the study, and he was able to discuss the findings, the results, and ask them for suggestions to sort of complement the findings that he had and how we could translate it into best practices. So I thought that was excellent for me, was because I've been doing research for a long time, and very seldom, it's very hard to get these investigators to come back to the people to talk about what the outcomes are, the results, and how it would impact them or their community. And he does a very good job at that. So that's one of the reasons my organization and myself stay committed to working with University of Maryland through Dr. Mullins, because they are not one of the, and his team, that is wonderful. I never want to leave the team out. No, they're very good. They complement his work. And so they just don't come, and he's very authentically and sincerely concerned about the community and what happens there in their voices, their voice count. It shows, and he always come back to talk to them about what the results were. So that is I find that very uplifting.
My pastor, Dr. Franklin Lance, has this habit of inviting you to a meeting. And when you go into that meeting, you come out with like 20 jobs. It's always, you thinking you're just going to hear something, but you always end up doing something. So this one day, my pastor invited me to a meeting, and I told him no. So he said, get up, we're going to this meeting. So I go to a meeting, and it's Dr. Mullins and his team. And all I hear is research. And after the experiences I've had, I'm already thinking, I ain't doing that. So at the end of a presentation, Dr. Mullins asked, would I be interested in, joining or participating? And I said no. And then he talked some more and, tried to reword it, and then said, so do you think, no, I'm not doing it. So then he says, well, maybe one day, there was a nice young lady that was there, and she can come meet you for lunch. And by that time, I just wanted to get out. I was like, okay, yeah, she can come up and talk to me. So when she came to talk to me, she gave me another spiel, and I said no. So then she asked, well, can we have a table at your health fair, at your World AIDS event? And I'm thinking, okay, I'll give them a table, I'll sit them in a corner so I can see them, make sure. So they were the first team to get there for the health fair. So as I'm setting up, they came, one of the team members came up and said, do you mind if we go get coffee and donuts for the community? So I said, that would be nice, thank you. So they went out and got all this coffee and donuts. They set it up and they came, and then when I looked around, they were sitting at the table with our community, you know, actually touching, you know, listening and not asking them for anything, but listening to them. And at that point, Patience program had me. You know, whatever they wanted, I'd be right there for. And through that, I've met so many wonderful people. And now I'm on a project at the very beginning of a research study. And I'm able to put in the patient's perspective as they develop this research. And, you know, to be there to let them know, no, that doesn't sound right. No, that's not fair. You know, just to give that voice, you know, and to know that they're listening. So I'm honored to be a part of the Patience program, and I'm still not doing everything that my past acts.
I'd like to close this panel by saying that it has been a delight to be with you all today, and to thank Dr. Mullins and his team for inviting me to be a part of this. My opportunity to reflect on the positive is much as the other panelists have said, and it comes down to respect. If you're given an opportunity from the foundation level to exercise influence, if you interact with researchers who, when you leave, haven't had you tell them your life story because they're entitled to know it, but only have asked you about what they're researching, and if you've been engaged in a way that allows you to retain your own autonomy, what more can you ask? Because we as a community, we want to give back. We want to help. We want to render the world in which we live a better place.
Yes.
And we're happy to do it if we're embraced and welcomed by those who are smart enough and interested enough to do the work in a way that is respectful of who we are.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I just want to go on the record. I did not ask them to talk about the Patience program. I asked them to talk about a positive experience. We'd like to address the questions we received. Oh, great, we have more. There are a couple here that are the same, so I'm going to just kind of group these together. This is great. Thank you so much. They have a similar theme. So, to our panelists, unfortunately, read it, emerging leaders in research do carry the past sins of prior researchers who have taken advantage of communities. What advice would you give to someone just beginning their career to engage the community and work in research?
I would tell them to just be authentic when talking to the community.
Yes.
Have empathy as you talk to people. Actually listen to what they say.
Yeah.
Because if you listen and you engage them as if you were engaging a friend or a family member, you will get honest information and valuable information. So just remember that. Don't think of them as a subject, a participant, you know, but think of them as they are. You know, they're humans who, you know, want to be heard. So just, I would say that. Empathy and listening.
I just wanted to add to that, to be truthful, to be sincere, because people can sense these things, and to be inclusive. When you're inclusive, you allow people to feel that you are part of what their conversation is about, you're part of what they're about to do, and that your input counts and it's valuable. It's okay.
So the next question, do the panelists think that patient care in research studies has improved in recent years? Dan?
I think the fact that there is patient-centered research underway, and that it's embraced not only here at the University of Maryland, but at the University of Indiana, at folks at University of Washington, and all around the country, and at the federal level, that the concept that it's even discussed is a reflection that improvement has been realized. And I think there's no doubt that that's the case. And I genuinely think, even when we reflect on some of the tough decisions that have been made in the past or the bad treatment that's been engaged in, that people who do this work are genuinely motivated by a desire to do good. And I think we have to be mindful as a community that that is their motivation. And so I think there's no doubt that improvement has been and is occurring and will continue to occur as long as we as a community make the researchers be accountable for their conduct.
I would just add quickly that one promising project I've noticed is starting this year, and it will literally identify specific comments that patients make, specific questions and issues that they raise that have indeed changed and improved the design of a study and its implementation. So when the science itself says patient engagement is good for the studies, I mean, that's a long way from, let's try having some patients on this panel.
I live in Reservoir Hill. How can we get involved as neighbors along with our synagogue? So how would you advise someone in our community to get involved in the process?
If you're in this community, of course, I would simply say reach out to Dr. Mullins in the Patients Program, and even if it's not in his program, he'll have resources and networks. If you're in other communities where you don't have access to this program, looking for things like patient-centered research is going to usually send you in the right direction. So a little bit of Googling and a little bit of initiative and a little bit of knowing what words to look for will often lead you to receptive quarters.
It's been an honor to work with them. I work with them on a daily basis, but on this panel in particular, I hope you've enjoyed our talk, our time together today. I believe, will be hanging around for a little bit, so if you have additional questions, and again, I apologize we didn't have time to get to the last question, please reach out to the panelists. They would love to speak with you further.